an extra prescription for something like that. Again, with people that have medicines that are dependent on these medicines, like heart medications or, something along those lines. Epileptics have to take medication all the time to prevent seizures. So, again, those are people that need to make sure that they have reserves of their medicines on hand. Again, people that are, maybe mothers that are breastfeeding or that are no longer breastfeeding need to make sure that they have a supply of formula for their children, just extras. Formula is expensive. I can't believe the prices on that stuff.
Oh, my.
But also, just basically make sure to have first aid kit. Basic first aid kits come with Band-Aids and alcohol swabs and, stuff along those lines. If you can put some extras in there to kind of doctor it up, that's even better. In my first aid kits, I have smelling salts, just in case somebody faints. That way you don't have to rush them to the hospital if it's not necessary. Just basic things, tweezers, flashlights. Also, a box of gloves is cheap, and you get like 100 pairs in them. Gloves can be a lifesaver. They really can. You can use them for a variety of things. People in the military can attest to that. When they're out in the battlefield, they have a lot of uses for your basic stuff. So I
Certainly.
think that's really, really good.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's at this point that due to time considerations, folks, Nia and I could go into a tremendous amount of detail with some of these supplies. She had made mention or reference to flashlights and not just flashlights, but do you have enough batteries on hand to power the flashlights and power your emergency radio, which is another example of something you should have. A portable radio that can either be operated by hand crank to recharge its batteries and or other. Folks, it is a tremendous list of detailed considerations, and this is where I'd like to point you again toward Internet-based resources. Now, very curiously, about 6 weeks back, our own United States Centers for Disease Control issued a bulletin and a set of information, web-based resources that they described to the public as being prepared for a zombie apocalypse. A zombie apocalypse. Now that sounds pretty provocative, I think, and in fact, the Centers for Disease Control themselves said that what they were really striving to do is to generate interest and get people to pay attention about preparedness. Not, of course, that they feel that there will be a zombie apocalypse, but that if they just referred to tornado or hurricane preparedness, everyone would be asleep at the wheel. It wouldn't get their attention. So that's their claim. And yet, what I think is interesting is that the Army itself has issued a field manual in the course of that span of time. That field manual itself points toward being prepared in the event of zombie attack. Now, that gets my yellow flag and perhaps my red flag up even. What I'd like you to think about is this. Zombies in the traditional sense, like the movies, etc., no. But what happens to a people, a population, whether it's a city or whether it's an entire country, a population that has become as profoundly prescribed to various forms of medication, whether they might be the mood-altering type, whether we're talking about drugs like Prozac and all of these others. Also, what happens to a population that is addicted to nicotine and caffeine? What happens to those millions of people if suddenly those supply lines are limited or entirely cut off again? Think about yourself. If you've tried to quit tobacco cold turkey or caffeine cold turkey, if you've tried to drop off of some of these prescription drugs that you might be on and you've experienced some of those interactions, how it can affect your health, your mental state, well, folks, think what happens if millions of people suddenly no longer have access to those various substances that we have become, well, accustomed to and for some of us addicted to. When millions of people suddenly don't have those, I guess your humble host would like to propose to you that that might very well represent the equivalent of a zombie apocalypse. So I'd like you to do a web search. Go to the website for the Centers for Disease Control. You can do a Google or a Yahoo search for CDC, the acronym, CDC zombies, and that by itself should be enough to get you directly to the page that has, again, a tremendous listing of the resources, the details that Nia and I just don't have time to try to cover them all, but we'll give you a good grounding on some of those preparedness considerations for those events. And Nia, I know I've been talking here for quite a while. I want to make sure I don't hear my own voice for a little bit. Any thoughts along those lines, as provocative or sensationalistic as a zombie attack might sound, but any thoughts along those lines?
You know, you said you were talking about things kind of going in through one ear and out the other, and I couldn't agree more. Sometimes when people talk about preparedness, it's just, a giant snooze. You're like, wow, listen to this pill,
Exactly.
I'd rather be on my phone texting or something, and you don't really pay attention, and because it's not provocative, it's not enticing, it's not an attention grabber, but it will be an attention grabber when it comes down to it, and another thing that I'm going to appeal to whoever's listening that's maybe in medicine or, not even just medicine, but a civil kind of career, something along the lines of, an emergency operator or, emergency services or a police officer. People in the medical field and in those fields, they know firsthand, and I'm going to appeal to you guys, they know firsthand how people can change in the face of fear. And people do not underestimate the power of fear over people. It turns them very primal. And you would not believe the things that people would do because they were simply afraid. I mean, they get very aggressive and do things, their personality changes. I can't tell you how many times I've had patients, you would just not believe. I could sit here forever and tell you stories, but the point is that these people will later come back once they've calmed down and, just apologize through, just like an hour of apologies because they just couldn't believe how they reacted themselves to something that was so simple, but that truly, truly scared them at that time, And fear is a powerful weapon, and if people are in mass hysteria, you definitely want to learn how to either A, avoid them, or B, deal with them. And something to take into consideration is self-defense. Not even just you as an adult learning for you, your husband, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, but also your children. Your children need to learn how to be able to be okay just in case you were not there to protect them. So I think involving your kids in things like karate or sports, something to show them some kind of self-defense or self-sufficiency is a good thing. So I think that those are absolutely great points that you were making.
And fantastic thoughts that you've added along those lines as well, Nia. You got my mind thinking on several different directions through the course of what you've shared. And I think, Hurricane Katrina, once again, provides us a pretty crisp example of just exactly how quickly we can lose our courtesies, our politeness, the simple kindnesses that we show to one another on a daily basis. I think that provides us an example of how quickly some of those things can erode away. Would that be fair to say?
I think that is true on many levels. However, I think that in the face of danger and catastrophe and just total upheaval, I think that you will find a lot of people become very close. I can't even tell you how many neighbors I've gotten to know because our power went out during a hurricane season, or they came over because their window broke, or, they needed someplace safe to be, or, where I lived during a hurricane, we all lost our electricity, like I told you, for about 2 months, and so we all had all of this food that we had to get rid of because it wasn't going to last in our freezers and refrigerator. So what we did was we did like a cookout for like a bunch of the houses on our block.
Very
and
cool.
Everybody ended up coming out, and just everybody was so wonderful. But that's in a lighter scenario. But yeah, in a worst case scenario, you have to be very careful, because you know what? Public services will be there to kind of control the crowd, not to protect you. They're going to be there to protect the interests of the the greater people, and that'll be to control the greater people. So that will not be to your benefit. So I think that is definitely something to consider.
Quite right. You're absolutely right, and you make a great point, and I'm so thankful that you did that. Oftentimes, these sort of events, these catastrophes or these disasters can draw people together, and we have examples of that also from Katrina. I've read stories about how different folks who, when they were seeking safety in the Superdome, that there were folks that had never met one another before, but they remain in close contact, almost like family, even today, and I'm sure that will continue on into the future. And yet I think it also illustrates for us that, people are just wired differently. And you have some folks who are wired that these sort of unexpected events will draw them together, will bring out the best in them. And unfortunately, we also have from history those examples of the people that are wired the other way, where uncertainties and danger and these hazards bring out the worst in them. And we saw that happening throughout the streets of New Orleans as a result of Katrina. And folks, ladies and gentlemen of my listening audience, you know from my past shows that I'm not afraid to say that also the members of our society's services, the police force themselves, oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but in some cases, they were of the type that it brought out the worst in them, and that we saw some of the ugly side of human behavior coming from those representatives of law enforcement, from the fields of medicine, but also from elected leadership as well. So I guess the moral of the story is that until you know someone and have been through this sort of unexpected catastrophe or disaster with them, then you maybe don't really know them at all. And we don't know if they're wired in the first way, which is where this will bring out the best in them, or if they're wired in the other way, which is where it would bring out the worst in them potentially. But Nia, any other thoughts along these lines, some of these topics we've covered here in the last section?
I just wanted to add really quickly, when we were talking about self-defense for the family, I think it's very important, especially for the girls. A lot of times in a family where there's mixed male and female, a lot of times there's a lot of, okay, well, the boys will protect us and kind of along those thought lines. But
yes,
it's really important for girls to be kind of proactive in that area too, because it's really important for them to be able to defend themselves. And as far as teaching kids how to defend themselves only in worst-case scenarios like we've been talking about, I think that an easier way to do that is take them to play archery one weekend, or a couple weekends. That's something simple, maybe even paintballing if you have some teenagers. It's simple, but it provides them with skills that they can later refer to if they really needed it. Again, martial arts is a great thing. It provides them with exercise. It gets them away from the video games and the texting, and it provides them with a sense of accomplishment as well. I think that those are great things to do, and you should take those things into consideration, because I think that those are important as well.
Those are just excellent examples, Nia. The martial arts or some of these other, paintballing, for example, physical activities, folks. Those accomplish multiple tasks, all in one movement. They get our kids active, involved, exercising, relating with other young people of their same age, networking, if you will, in that sense, building their social skills. And at the same time, it's preparing them with some basic skills and ideas about preparation that hopefully will never come into play or need to in their lifetime. And yet, once again, if you were in the tornado-stricken regions this year, the wildfire regions, the flooding regions, all of these sorts of things that could happen and do happen every single year and every day in some part of the world, in those unlikely or unhoped for events, they would have a degree of preparedness that otherwise they would not if we just let them stay in front of the TV and the Xbox and et cetera. So excellent points, Nia. Thank you there too.
You're welcome.
One area that we hadn't really covered yet, and I want to make sure that we cover this area also with some thoughts, is food itself.